North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un made his first foreign trip this week since assuming power in 2011, meeting China's President Xi Jinping in a surprise visit to Beijing. Kim is set to attend a summit with South Korean President Moon Jae-in late in April, and a meetup with President Trump is tentatively in the works as well. The president tweeted Wednesday, quote, "For years and through many administrations, everyone said that peace and denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula was not even a small possibility. Now there is a good chance that Kim Jong Un will do what is right for his people and for humanity. Look forward to our meeting." Paul Wolfowitz is a visiting scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. He served in many roles in government, including Deputy Secretary of Defense for President George W. Bush. Welcome, Paul. So
good to be with you.
Let me ask you first about John Bolton, the new National Security Advisor. You've known John Bolton, worked with him for years. How would you describe his worldview?
You know, I think in all these descriptions of John's worldview, there's a confusion between strategy and tactics. Strategically, I think he's very clear about who our enemies and adversaries are and who our friends are, and believes very much in pushing back on our adversaries and supporting our friends. But he does so, I think, in a generally very pragmatic way. One of the outstanding examples is what he pulled off in the first term of President George W. Bush, in the early part of this century. It was called the Proliferation Security Initiative. It was a way of getting an international legal basis for intercepting ships that were carrying contraband from North Korea and other places without going through the impossible process of a whole revision of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It was very successful. I think it led to intercepting the centrifuges that were heading to Libya. He also, I'm told, I wasn't really involved in this, but someone who was a legal advisor in the State Department many years ago said that John pulled off something people said was impossible, which was getting the UN General Assembly to reverse the Zionism is Racism resolution back in 1991,
right,
when he was working for President George H.W. Bush. So he's a man who knows how to get things done. I think people should keep that in mind.
All right, that's going to be fascinating to watch. Let's talk about North Korea, because this, the meeting this week with Xi Jinping and Kim Jong Un. What do you make of that? Is that an enhancement for peace, or is that just play to the benefit of Kim?
Well, it certainly plays to the benefit of Kim. It puts him on the world stage. It makes him a much bigger figure than no North Korean leaders ever met with a U.S. president. Just take that on the surface. But we also have to remember we know very little about anything that's going on behind the scenes. And
right.
I imagine quite a bit is going on. And this could just be a repeat of a play we've seen over and over again of play for time, promise things later, collect payment now, relax the sanctions. That would obviously be good both for Kim Jong Un and for Xi Jinping in China. But there could be something bigger going on, and I think we ought to keep our eye on that, because I'm not sure it's a good thing. He talks about the idea that he would not need nuclear weapons if North Korea's security was assured, but his demands for North Korean security assurance go a very long way. They basically involve the U.S. leaving South Korea militarily, some kind of deal between North and South Korea that might in fact end up being unification on Kim's terms. And unfortunately on this score, that would clearly suit Xi Jinping in China. And unfortunately it would suit possibly the current South Korean government, which is very sketchy, to be charitable,
right,
in its view of North Korea. And it just might suit President Trump's agenda of getting U.S. troops out of the peninsula, where they are still there 60 years after the armistice, and it's only because of the threat from North Korea.
But wait a minute.
But I think we could get in a lot of trouble there.
Yeah, okay. Well, that could be, I mean, I think some people look at that, particularly that outcome, and say, well, that could be the worst case scenario from a U.S. strategic interest, because you'd be tempted to, depending on the promises, once again, from Kim Jong Un, that they were in fact going to get rid of their nuclear program when they've violated how many promises over the last 25 years. So you'd have to say, if we fell for that, if Donald Trump fell for that, that would be a strategic defeat.
I think it would be.
Yeah.
And I think it would cause great splits between us and Japan, and between us and the half of the South Korean population that is properly skeptical about North Korea.
But we don't, of course, know where this is headed. But one thing that seems obvious is the meeting with Xi Jinping and then this planned meeting with the South Korean president that Kim Jong Un has planned. This is not the diplomatic isolation that they were under for more than for a long time, particularly in the Trump administration, where they're trying to apply so much pressure. This really does, as you say, put Kim on the world stage and makes him appear as if he's an equal with all of these leaders, not just a rogue government.
Yeah, although if you look at the body language of that meeting in China, it's pretty clear who's the boss, and it's not Kim Jong Un.
Well, true, but do you know what China is doing here? We don't know what role China is playing behind the scenes, do we?
We don't, and we do know that in the past China's played a very, I would say, less than honest role in saying they're going to do things and then not doing them, and actually assisting this nuclear program, which they claim not to want to see happen.
All right.
So, look, the next step should have been, in my view, not what we're talking about here with all of this international melodrama, but rather a real tightening of the screws, a real pressure on China to really cut off North Korea and really force a major change.
What advice would you have for President Trump going into a summit?
I think I would say be very careful. Don't get caught up in your own rhetoric about it. You've produced a meeting that probably no other president would have produced under conditions that are generally a response to American pressure. That's a good thing. But don't feel you then have to prove that you were successful by agreeing to something that you shouldn't agree to.
All right. Thank you, Paul Wolfowitz. Appreciate your coming in.